Welcome into Falcons Today by Chat Sports. Day 3 of NFL free agency is underway, and I want to talk about the Falcons' path to finding an edge rusher because Danielle Hunter was the number one pass rusher in free agency. He signed a 2-year, $49 million contract with the Texans, and there was some very low-level chatter that the Falcons were interested in Danielle Hunter. I never found anyone to say that with some pedigree behind their name, but if Atlanta truly was interested in Danielle Hunter and they lost out on him, just like how they lost out on Montez Sweat during the NFL trade deadline, maybe they decide to pivot to another edge rusher. So we'll look at 5 free agent edge rushers Atlanta could land who are still available in free agency. First, I do want to remind everyone about the 3 signings the Falcons have made so far. Of course, Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney were the 2 big, noteworthy ones. They also slipped in a tight end signing, Charlie Werner. He comes over from the 49ers on a 3-year, $12 million contract. So that is your backup for Kyle Pitts after moving on from Jonnu Smith. But ultimately, Atlanta has been just dollar for dollar, the biggest spender so far in free agency. No one has given out more money in contracts than Atlanta, and that's primarily because of Kirk Cousins' deal. But let's talk about the pass rush for a moment. It's a spot that has plagued Atlanta ever since John Abraham retired, and if they had a game tomorrow, this would be their starting 5. Arnold Ebiketie up front, Zach Harrison, David Onyemata, Grady Jarrett, and Lorenzo Carter. I'm not even confident Lorenzo Carter will stay on this team by the time week 1 arrives. Zach Harrison will be entering his 2nd year after being a 3rd-round pick out of Ohio State last season. I think he ended the year on a really high note. So if the Falcons feel like they can't swing for another edge rusher or at least defensive end up front, maybe they feel comfortable with Harrison, Onyemata, and Jarrett. And honestly, I would probably be okay with that too. I know during free agency, we all just get the itch to have our team sign a player, but if they roll out Harrison, Onyemata, and Jarrett, I think that's a fine starting 3, but I'd like to see some more depth at that position. Now let's talk about some edge rushers who are still free agents as I film this Wednesday, March 13th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Chase Young with the San Francisco 49ers, a very polarizing player. There are some potential red flags in terms of his locker room etiquette / off the field because tore his ACL in 2021. That's a big time bummer. But then there were questions about the way he went about his rehab. Ultimately, the Commanders did not pick up his 5th-year option. That was a head-scratching decision. And I think GMs probably have a very different opinion than your average fan does on Chase Young. However, I do think there was enough talent to warrant a decently large contract. I think it's going to be a 1-year prove-it deal. I could see him getting a 1-year, $12 million contract with a team that isn't quite ready to commit to him more than just 1 season, but they do believe he can be an impactful edge rusher. So if you want to look for a high ceiling but also a pretty low floor kind of player, that's Chase Young for you. Now let me know, would you sign Chase Young? Atlanta was very interested in his former teammate Montez Sweat. Ultimately, the Bears made a better offer than the Falcons did, and they got him for a 2nd. To me, that says a lot. Atlanta wanted Montez Sweat. They were watching a lot of commies film, and they kept going to Sweat. I don't think they're going to circle back to Chase Young if they passed on him back at the NFL trade deadline. Although maybe now that they don't have to give up a draft pick for him, that could change their opinion. 2nd free agent, edge, pass rusher, whatever you want to call it. How about Calais Campbell? I know that Campbell talked about a reunion, Terry Fontenot talked about a reunion, and I don't see why the 2 sides wouldn't want to see it happen. 6.5 sacks last year. He is not paying any attention to his age whatsoever. He's still a productive player, 10 tackles for loss. He was very available for Atlanta last year. Usually as you get up in the age column, your knees and your back start giving out a little bit, especially when you play football, but that does not seem to be the case for Campbell. Now, last year, he signed with the Falcons on a 1-year, $7 million deal. As he gets a little bit older, that price might drop a little bit, but that could still be the same kind of contract he lands. So, for now, I'll put it a 1-year, $5 million contract. I'd be 100% on board with the Calais Campbell round 2. I thought he was a good fit in this locker room. He was super excited and passionate when he joined Atlanta because he knew he didn't have a whole lot of years left in the tank. So for him to pick the Falcons last offseason, I think that was a sign of he felt like that was an organization headed in the right direction. They go out and get Kirk Cousins, a massive upgrade from Desmond Ridder, and I'm sure he's even more eager to come back and try and win something with the Falcons. Now, we're going to look at 3 more edge rushers in just a moment, but first, I want to share with you guys an awesome deal going on at Prize Picks. Now, you might be asking yourself, what the heck is Prize Picks? Well, it's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, where all you do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Now, you can look at my selections for the NBA games on Wednesday nights. Might be too late to join me depending on when you're watching this, but no matter what, you can have your own fun by making your own selections, like I did by taking the more on James Harden at 3.14 points. Prize Picks is always filled with these very fun and just random stat projections. They did that one for Pi Day, so if you want to be a part of something like that, Prize Picks is a spot where you can turn $10 into $1,000. That's 100x your money with as little as 4 correct picks on NBA, NHL, and college basketball. So join Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, and download the Prize Picks app and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, that's prizepicks.com/CLNS or download the app, but use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy at Prize Picks. Moving on to another defensive end edge rusher. How about Jadeveon Clowney? Former first overall pick, as we know. Clowney last season with the Baltimore Ravens, he had one of the best years of his NFL career. He put up 9.5 sacks. That was a career high for Clowney. Clowney has struggled to really find a long-term home, and I still don't think he's going to find a long-term home. It could be a reunion with the Baltimore Ravens or possibly with his hometown Carolina Panthers. That has been a heavily rumored spot for Jadeveon Clowney. So I think Clowney, after having a 9.5 sack year, he might get a 1-year, $6 million contract. That may be a little bit on the high end. That could be something worth up to $6 million, but a base salary of $4 million with $2 million in incentives tossed in. I personally would pass on Clowney. It's just too fluky. It's 1 year he's good. The next year he's got no sacks. He has been living out of a suitcase ever since he really left Seattle. He went to Tennessee, and then he went to Cleveland, then he went to Baltimore and Seattle. He's been all over the world. Baltimore most recently. I just don't think I would bet their starting spot on Clowney, despite having a good year a season ago. I think that's a bigger product of him being in the Baltimore Ravens defense than just him finding a fountain of youth at 30 years old in his career. Now, the next free agent guy is Bud Dupree. I'm going to roll back the possibility of Dupree returning. I don't think it's very likely, but then again, Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell, these are 2 guys that led the Falcons in sacks last year with 6.5. So maybe Terry Fontenot, after potentially missing out on Danielle Hunter or some other top-tier free agent edge rushers, his plan B all along was, well, these guys were pretty productive for us last season. Why not bring them back for another year since we weren't able to go get one of the top guys anyway? Instead of trying out a different edge rusher that may or may not be better, we can have some continuity and a little bit of stability with familiar faces like Campbell and Dupree. Now, Bud Dupree signed a cheap 1-year, $2.5 million contract a season ago. He played well, so maybe that price goes up to $3 million. Maybe it's worth 3 to 5 or somewhere in that range, but it's not going to be a very expensive signing for Bud Dupree, who I think played better than I thought he would, that's for sure, after some really down seasons in Tennessee. One more guy to look at, but first, join the #1 Falcons YouTube channel. I can't really believe that we have over 20,000 subscribers. This channel has really taken off this offseason. So if you recently joined us, thank you so much. And if you haven't yet, please consider doing so. 5th and final edge rusher is Randy Gregory. By the way, you might be noticing a bit of a trend here. There's not a lot of great guys out there anymore, and that's somewhat the nature of free agency. I think people forget that free agents are players that the prior team didn't want anymore. And that usually means that there are some issues. And Randy Gregory, well, there's definitely some issues, from lack of availability to early in his career not being able to stay off the weed to getting traded from Denver to San Francisco. He signed a 5-year, $70 million contract, and he played, I think, 10 games with the Broncos, 9 games with Denver. Then he goes over to San Francisco, where he actually was a very good part of that rotation. Like, he wasn't a clear-cut number one pass rusher, but he circled and rotated in with Bosa and Young and Armstead and all those other guys they've got seeking the quarterback. And I think Randy Gregory, while he's not a very attractive free agent at this time of his career, maybe he is Atlanta's 2024 Bud Dupree, where if they have high hopes in free agency for other guys that they miss out on, maybe they give Randy Gregory a call after the draft, especially if they don't get some of the players they were hoping for in the draft and they know, well, Randy Gregory's not going anywhere, so we can wait and see on that front. And maybe he's a May or June signing for almost the league minimum $2.5 million. So who do you want the Falcons to sign? Let me know in the comment section below. Of the 5 guys we looked at today, I think I'd be most inclined to bring back Calais Campbell. He is an invaluable part of the locker room, a Walter Payton Man of the Year. Everywhere he's been, people have been raving about his leadership, his work ethic, his drive. He's almost always available for teams. I would be very down for a Calais Campbell return, put him at defensive end, and then you go take Dallas Turner at number 8, and you put him at outside linebacker to replace Bud Dupree, and you've got Arnold Ebiketie and Dallas Turner coming off the edge for you, a first and a second-round draft pick. Hopefully that works out. Well, that will do it for us on this edition of Falcons Today. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead, scroll on down, and click that sub button today.